Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. This will have to be my last video for the day because I got things I do need to take care of. But what a way to wrap up my content creation on a nice little Sunday here. This is a topic I haven't really spoken about on the channel in depth. And when I realized that, I was like, I'm kind of surprised I haven't yet. But it doesn't come up too much. It's a piece. There's a piece here from Hodor and his blog from yesterday. And it's titled Scenario, Ripple Goes Public. And I think there may have been maybe one or two occasions where I've conceptually brought up this idea, but I haven't covered it in any meaningful way. And I thought this would just be an awesome opportunity to run through with you potentially, because it's kind of like it's kind of a mental exercise, thinking through what would this even look like, what's the purpose, all that fun stuff. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this. I'm actually going to let Hodor do pretty much all the talking here. This is just really super well written. And from now and then, from time to time, I like to do more so like a community highlight type of thing and just kind of let a content creator kind of speak for themselves and share with you something that maybe you would have read, but maybe you didn't. I think I don't know. To be perfectly honest, I mean, I'm more likely to watch something on YouTube than to read something. So I just got to admit that, just in general. So I do read all of Hodor's blogs, though, that's for sure. But anyway, let's dig into this piece here. What does the future hold? Investors that enter the crypto market will inevitably discover that it's necessary for them to determine on their own what the future may bring, given different circumstances, risks, and contingencies. None of us were given a pamphlet on what to expect. None of us knows how the market will behave. And most of us are not benefiting from inside information about market gyrations. But we all must imagine the future. None of us would have purchased digital assets if we didn't believe they would rise in value. So at a minimum, each of us has gone through the process of imagining the future with respect to digital assets. In addition, there are some business and political developments that can substantially impact these projections. And knowing how outcomes might be materially different based on these possibilities is important for making effective investment decisions or for achieving a level of serenity and confidence in your holdings no matter what the market reflects in the short term. When it comes to XRP, there are a few different scenarios that may happen. Some are lower probabilities, while others are higher probability. I'm going to zero in on one scenario for purposes of today's article, Ripple Goes Public. Silicon Valley has plenty of examples of how much money can be raised from an initial public offering. Examples stretch back to the 90s and early 2000s, during the golden age of technology and internet IPOs. If you're completely new to financial topics, the term IPO stands for Initial Public Offering, which is when a private company, owned by perhaps a small number of people, decides to raise money by creating new company shares and then selling them to the public. Private companies are mostly reluctant to go public because there are many more reporting and regulatory requirements for public companies. Hence, it's much easier to run a private company. Private companies don't have as much compliance baggage and are typically able to respond quicker to different business conditions. However, private companies do sometimes go public because of the massive amount of money they receive for these additional shares. This process of raising money through sales of shares is called equity financing, and it's the biggest incentive for private companies to go public. An Investor Guide article said it best, quote, "Not only does the company instantly receive a large infusion of cash, but the original investors and employees with an interest in the company also become instantly wealthy upon the valuation of their stock in the market." And the piece continues. This comment is no small factor in the decision making by executives. My guess is that some of the initial Ripple founders would become fantastically wealthy based only on the value of their original shares in the company. Despite the fact that Ripple raises money from their software revenue and sales of XRP, both of these are no comparison to the amount of cash that would be raised by an initial public offering for the company. In my estimation, Ripple's IPO should be viewed equivalently to, let's say, Uber, because Ripple's business use case should be just as wide-ranging in terms of market. While Uber claims its total addressable market is $12 trillion based on entering new markets like mobility, food delivery, and freight shipping, Ripple's market share should also be a very sizable share of the remittance and payment market, including P2P, replacement of Nostro-Vostro accounts, and B2C and B2B payments. But perhaps it's better to look at a collection of IPOs to get some sense of the capital raised. High-profile IPOs and dollars raised, and he's got a list of 5. Uber, $8 billion. Facebook, $16 billion. Visa, $18 billion. TradeWeb, $1 billion. Avantor Performance, $4 billion. Where would Ripple end up in terms of money raised? The analysts and underwriters involved will normally set an IPO price that is loosely, some would say very loosely, based on fundamental business factors of the underlying company. In the case of Ripple, I think it's valuation based on a combination of its future total addressable market with an eye towards payment processing software, micropayments, tokenization, payment streaming, and smart contracts. In addition, the analysts would need to account for Ripple's ownership interests in potentially dozens of other companies as part of the Spring Initiative. In short, Ripple's IPO would be sizable. I'd say it should be judged equivalently to Visa or greater, but to be conservative, we should probably judge a future IPO as an average of the above list, minus a specific percentage. The average of all the mentioned IPOs is $9.4 billion. Let's assume Ripple will conservatively pull in half of that number in capital, $4.7 billion. So, roughly $5 billion cash. That's a lot of cash. And this amount purposefully excludes the market value that would be related to the value of the XRP that Ripple holds. I imagine that IPO marketers would attempt to include that in the price, but we will ignore it during our analysis. What could Ripple do with $5 billion? Well, for one thing, a massive influx of capital will sometimes create unanticipated outcomes. Unexpected wealth could prompt some executives to retire or scale back their work. Usually, however, this influx of capital from an IPO is used by the company to expand and achieve far greater levels of growth than they otherwise would. Thus far, Ripple has been able to access capital from its consulting revenue, software sales and licensing, and its sales of XRP from its treasury. But these sources don't compare to what an IPO could provide. Here's an interesting comparison. All Ripple sales of XRP ever, $1.1 billion. Possible IPO cash influx, $5 billion. As you can see, an IPO would dwarf what Ripple is able to do on its own through sales of XRP. Not only that, but the fact that Ripple is able to sell XRP might actually increase its IPO price. The world of high finance can yield some surprising possibilities. So what would a post-IPO future look like for Ripple and for XRP holders? Well, for starters, life would be more annoying for Ripple. The money and cash from an IPO has strings attached, and mainly, they take the form of enhanced reporting requirements for the company. Quarterly reports must be prepared. Official audits must be conducted. Financial statements must be reviewed and published. And a post-IPO company is almost always held to a more strenuous measure of accountability by its shareholders than a private company. So there will be a cost and many annoyances to the executive team at Ripple. What about the XRP? A public company would be faced with the same dilemmas that private Ripple is. However, one key difference is the level of financing and credit. A post-IPO company normally has access to a wider array of credit than a private company, and may have more options to raise cash than merely to increase sales of either services or XRP. So I think XRP programmatic sales would either decline or cease entirely. I think wholesale sales of XRP to banks and market makers would continue. However, because that involves directly growing the network of RippleNet member institutions that utilize XRP, selling XRP to these participants is not only expected, but necessary. Programmatic sales are not. One very positive aspect of having a pile of cash from an IPO would be to spend it on things that grow the market value of either the company or XRP. Unlike all the other companies quoted in this article as examples of an IPO, none have had a digital asset that comprises billions of dollars of value. Currently, Ripple is not speaking a lot about XRP or its ability to grow XRP's value because there are ongoing legal matters, both lawsuits and regulatory questions, that necessitate a more circumspect communication strategy. Once these legal outcomes are etched in stone, the company may see fit to ramp up its marketing. After all, there's nothing prohibiting a company, whether public or private, from promoting the ownership of an item in their inventory, right? And this marketing might be phenomenal. With $5 billion, no amount of potential marketing is out of reach, and the days of Super Bowl advertisements about digital assets may be upon us. To date, the only participants in the crypto market that have engaged mainstream advertising and its participants have been the exchanges, and they make no money if the market goes up or down. I'm sorry, I read that wrong, and I knew it was wrong as I read it. And they make money no matter if the market goes up or down. My favorite ad so far is Christian Nairn's advertisement for eToro. Just imagine if Ripple could afford to hire him for XRP-related promotions in a post-IPO, post-legal issue world. Even now, we can see clearly that Ripple has an appetite for acquisitions. Back when Ripple first hired Ron Will, I thought it was a sign that the company was telegraphing its intention to go public sooner than later. I was wrong. What became clearly apparent was that Ripple was more interested in acquiring other companies rather than attempting to create curb appeal prior to an IPO. This is great news, as it speaks of even greater levels of confidence by Ripple's executive team than even I had foreseen. They had clearly mapped out a strategy to acquire companies that represented any possible missing pieces to their market rollout of software and services. They acquired portions of companies through Spring, although for the most part, these ownership levels are kept private through non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. And of course, they purchased a chunk of MoneyGram in exchange for an ownership interest in that company, along with the transformation of MoneyGram's payment flows to include usage of XRP as a bridge asset. One thing is for certain, if Ripple has an opportunity to make more deals to integrate the use of XRP, they will do it. Not only that, but because the cost savings have allowed MoneyGram to survive and thrive, my guess is that other remittance processors will be wanting to go the same route and use XRP for settlement. In short, an IPO would enable Ripple to make dozens of more deals in short order. The amount of free publicity surrounding an IPO is substantial. While some part of the process is certainly paid for and is a formal part of an IPO marketing strategy, another measurable part is unplanned and takes place with the mainstream media outlets providing their unscripted opinions about the event. Even without an IPO, Ripple has received a large amount of publicity due to its leadership role as the largest private blockchain technology-related business in the United States. I've lost track of how many times news outlets have interviewed Chris Larson, Brad Garlinghouse, David Schwartz, and others. With an IPO, the company would receive even more free coverage leading up to its offering. When I think of what Ripple would do with the increased amount of capital, it's reflective of some of the same types of things they're doing today, only on a greater scale and with much larger results. Ripple is sponsoring educational programs with UBRI, funding XRP-related businesses with Spring, making major business deals to expand XRP's ecosystem, engaging with government and political leaders. The results thus far have been amazing. Ripple is a company that does a lot with very little, and when you think about it, it's not that they'd do a lot of additional new activities, but that they'd ramp up their existing plans with huge amounts of capital. What factors dissuade or prevent an IPO? One of the goals of an IPO is to achieve the highest possible company valuation prior to the offering. If Ripple waits until any pending lawsuits have been settled, it may enhance their ability to achieve a higher than average IPO share price. In addition, an IPO would necessarily distract Ripple's executive and board staff during times of industry turmoil or change. A private company is able to devote all its resources to problem solving and business tasks. A public company has to manage its image, prepare financial statements, and interface with thousands of public stockholders. Essentially, Ripple's ability to be nimble would decrease with an IPO, both before and after. From an XRP owner's perspective, most of us, especially readers of this blog, own some amount of XRP. From our perspective, a Ripple IPO is good news. It allows the company to continue the incredible work they're already doing, and it eases the pressure off of programmatic sales if they need additional levels of capital. It provides the company with one more option for using credit if it needs to. And the results they've already achieved could be considerably enhanced by an immediate infusion of billions of dollars. While reporting requirements are annoying for the company, my guess is that they're probably willing to pay that price if it means accelerating adoption of their payment processing software and its preferred digital asset, XRP. How about that? Well done, Hodor. Awesome piece there. And it was at some point, when was it? Shortly after I had entered the world of crypto, so it might have been the beginning of 2018, Brad Garlinghouse was asked in a television interview about the idea of an IPO, and I'm going to have to paraphrase it because it's been too long since I saw it, but he said, whatever he said, it led me to believe, okay, it was not at this time, so not ruling that out, but that's something to look into in the future. And so I will not be surprised that maybe it'll be years from now. Who knows? It could be a long time from now, but I will not be surprised if indeed that does happen. So you can tell me what you think below. That's it for this video. I am not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything because of anything that I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!